Yugoslavia is no more. How did this country came to be? It was created after the First World War, and after the Second World War it became a non-aligned communist nation led by dictator Josip Broz Tito. But when he died and the Iron Curtain came down, it all fell apart into savage wars. In this two-part video, we're going to discuss the rise and fall of Yugoslavia. Hey, if this is your first time, welcome to my channel History Hustle. I'm Stefan, history teacher, hustling history for you. And the only thing you have to do is make sure to subscribe. Also hit the notification bell to join the hustle. Let's start. The First World War shook the maps of Central and Eastern Europe intensely. Old empires fell apart and new countries were created. Now, nationalist sentiments dated back from the 19th century, so it was not that these countries just came out of nowhere. Still, it did very much happen that some people who considered themselves of the same nationality were ending up in different countries. Or people who considered themselves from a different nationality than the other were now merged into one nation. And a prime example of that was the newly created Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. The name says it all. It was created out of the former territories of the Austrian Hungarian Empire as well as Serbia and Montenegro. The Austrian Hungarian Empire was an empire in decline already before the First World War started. During the 19th century there was, for example, the Illyrian movement. That was a movement that wanted to create a nation state for the Croats, who now were under Austrian-Hungarian rule. During the First World War, Croats and Serbs created the Yugoslav Committee in London because they were in exile. And also they wanted to create a southern Slavic state because Yugoslavia basically means the land of southern Slavs. In 1917, the Corfu Declaration was signed between the Yugoslav Committee as well as the Serbian government in exile because Serbia was overrun by the Austrian-Hungarian army during the First World War. Now this declaration paved the way for the creation of a new nation state of the former Austrian-Hungarian territories as well as the country of Serbia and Montenegro. Speaking of Montenegro, Montenegro was basically absorbed by Serbia. There was a brief civil war in Montenegro before this between the whites, those who wanted to unify with Serbia, versus the greens, those who did not want it to be absorbed into a Greater Serbia, and eventually Montenegro ended up together with Serbia. Okay, now understand here that the Serbs played a leading role in this newly created multi-ethnic state called the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. First of all, the Croats and Slovenes fought under Austrian-Hungarian conscription during the First World War, and the Serbs, they were with the Allies. So therefore, Great Britain and France saw the Serbs as the rightful rulers of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. Also because the Serbs were basically the biggest minority in this multi-ethnic state. Historian Robert Gerward, he wrote in his book The Vanquished why this newly created Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes made a weak start from the get-go. Not only because it was such a multi-ethnic state, also because they had some strong opponents named Italy. And it's fascinating, you know, because before the outbreak of the First World War, there were already two Balkan wars that had taken place. And then, when there was another Balkan political murder, the assassination of Crown Prince Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, this sparked a whole world war. So after millions of people had died, just yet another multi-ethnic state was created. It looks like people are just too stubborn to learn from history. Now obviously it's much more complicated than this, and I will dive into this when I visit the countries I'm talking about separately, so I can make episodes and elaborate on the complex matters. To make that happen, feel free to support me on Patreon. Links are in the description. First, Yugoslavia was officially called the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, but this was changed in 1929 because then King Alexander I established a royal dictatorship, calling his country the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, subdividing his country in 9 provinces. Now, he was assassinated when he visited France in 1934 by extremist Croats. We'll get to them in a second. After this, a regency was established because Alexander's son was too young to rule. Now, in March 1941, the Second World War was in full swing now. Yugoslavia signed the Tripartite Pact and basically became one of the Axis powers, despite massive protests in the capital of Belgrade. Now, 2 days later, what followed was a British-backed coup d'etat, where Peter II, who was now 17 years old, was the son of assassinated Alexander I, came on the throne and basically established a pro-Allied state. Only next month, Nazi Germany invaded Yugoslavia and took control of it. Peter II went into exile. Now let's take a look at the map. What happened? Yugoslavia was partitioned by the Axis powers. Territories were annexed by Germany, Italy, Hungary, and Bulgaria. Montenegro became an Italian protectorate and Serbia a Nazi occupational zone. One large region was governed by the pro-Nazi Croats, the Ustasha movement, who were responsible for the assassination of Alexander I. The Ustashas created the independent state of Croatia. Now, these Ustashas were extremely brutal. To illustrate this, on the 9th of April 1942, they massacred thousands of Serbian families near the village of Srebrenica that even left the German occupational forces bewildered. Srebrenica became later known for another tragedy. We'll get to that later. When Italy was defeated in 1943, Germany took over most of its Yugoslav territories. Most of Yugoslavia would become liberated by the Yugoslav partisans that were led by Josip Broz Tito, who became the leader of the Second Yugoslavia, officially called the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It was a non-aligned communist nation that existed out of 6 federal republics and 2 autonomous regions: Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Slovenia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. And the 2 autonomous regions were Kosovo and Vojvodina. Tito efficiently mixed centralized governing with decentralizing politics. The individual federal republics had a great deal of autonomy. With his slogan, Brotherhood and Unity, he managed to keep the Serbs, the Croats, the Slovenes, the Bosniaks, and all the nationalities together. However, it fell apart because in 1980, Tito died, and it turned out that he had bankrupted the country. Soon, the ethnic tensions were back again, and the repressed sentiments surfaced. There were shortages and also hyperinflation. But this was nothing compared to the misery that would follow in the 1990s, because then 4 Yugoslav wars broke out. For that, make sure you check out next video. We're going to talk about the fall of Yugoslavia. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.